Hi everyone, welcome back to Chem Help ASAP. In this video we are going to be reviewing quadratic equations. That means we're going to take an equation with an x squared term and solve for x. Now we're going to do this two ways. The first way we're going to do it is by factoring, and the second way is we're going to use the quadratic equation. So let's get started. All right, let's practice solving for x when x is squared. First off, let's just talk about quadratics in general. So here is my general form for a quadratic. You'll notice again I have an x squared value. Now in terms of your x term and your constant term, those may be 0. So you can have a quadratic that is simply x squared equals 2. That's perfectly fine. You can have a quadratic that is x squared plus 3x is equal to 0. That's perfectly fine. So you do not have to have an x term or a constant term, but very often you will. So our first method for finding solutions to x is we are going to factor. I think factoring is the fastest way to find solutions, but some equations will factor and some equations will not factor. Let's work my first problem right here. So I am going to set myself up with two quantities that when I multiply will give me this x squared plus 7x plus 12. I know my x squared term is going to end up being x and x. Now I need factors of 12, and I'm going to see if I can get those to add to give me 7. So if I put a 3 here and a 4 here, 3 times 4 is 12. And if I add both of those terms, 3 plus 4 gives me 7. Set these equal to 0, which means when we're solving for x, we can set these individually equal to 0, which means x equals -3 or x equals -4. So when you have a quadratic, you will get two values for x always. Now, the values may be the same thing. It doesn't always happen, but you will always get two values for x. Okay, let's go on to our second quadratic that we can solve by factoring. The first thing I notice in this quadratic, it is not set equal to 0. So that is my very first step, is to write my quadratic so that is equal to 0. Remember, we're following our general form for quadratics. Now I know I'm going to factor this one, so I'm going to give myself two factors. That's going to be equal to 0, so I'll have a 2x here and an x here. I need factors of 126 that I can get to give me a 4x. So let's try 14 and 9. Now, this is a -126, which means I'm going to have a plus sign in one of these quantities and a minus sign in the other. So if I give myself a -14 and a +9, then what I've done is I've said 2 times 9 is 18. Minus 14, that does give me a +4. Now I just need to set each of these quantities equal to 0. So I have 2x minus 14 is equal to 0, and also x plus 9 equals to 0. This gives me x is equal to 7, and this one gives me x equals to -9. Again, I really like factoring if it ends up being an option, but it's not always an option. So let's talk about the quadratic equation, because we can always use the quadratic equation to solve for a value of x. Okay, so remembering these letters are coming from our general form of the quadratic. Let's take a look at this first quadratic right here. So in this quadratic, my a value is 1, my v value is 1, and my c value is -240. Make sure you pay attention to the signs. All right, at this point, now that I know my a, my b, and my c, I am simply plugging in to my quadratic equation. So x is equal to -1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times -240. And all of this is over 2 times 1. So now at this point, I just need to simplify. So this is going to be -1 plus or minus the square root of 961 over 2. I'm going to go ahead and take that square root. So this is -1 plus or minus 31 over 2. So you can see how this is going to give us two roots. So my first root is -1 plus 31 divided by 2. And my second root is x equals -1 minus 31 divided by 2. This gives me x is equal to 15, and this one gives me x is equal to -16. Again, it's a quadratic. It's x squared, which means I get 2 values for x. Okay, let's use a quadratic equation on this quadratic right here. Now notice it is not set equal to 0, so that is the first thing that I must do. I am going to put this quadratic in the proper form. Again, if you forget to do this step, you're going to end up with a c value of 10 instead of -10. So for this quadratic, my a equals 3, my b equals 2, and my c equals -10. Let's plug into the equation. This gives me -2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times -10. All of this over 2 times 3. Okay, so just simplifying here, we're going to have -2 plus or minus the square root of 124 over 6. Bringing this up and along to here, I get -2 plus or minus 11.1 over 6, which again gives me 2 roots. So I can have -2 plus 11.1 over 6, or I can have -2 minus 11.1 over 6, which gives me x can equal 1.52, or x can equal -2.18. This is where having strong algebra skills is going to help you out tremendously. These type of equations are most often found in equilibrium calculations, and so we tend to rely heavily on the quadratic formula. But keep in mind the factoring method because it's faster and easier than the quadratic formula. So if you can use it, use it. Now, if you need refreshers on other math topics, you can check out these videos here, and thanks so much for watching.